Hey, what's going on YouTube? As astute viewers, or at least the 50 to 30 of you who watch at least some of my Final Fantasy XIII playthrough videos know, I've been playing through Final Fantasy XIII at a snail's pace. This is taking so long for a couple of reasons, and I thought I might share some of those with you today, as well as talk about my general feelings and opinions about the game so far. If you don't follow me over on Twitch and only watch here on YouTube, that's fine, and it's also fine if you aren't part of my Discord community, but I will say that if you are, you're probably not going to be surprised by some of what I have to say here, at least in the early part here, because I do talk about more on those platforms. If you do want to check those things out, certainly do. We have a lot of fun both over on Twitch and in my Discord. And if you're a loyal YouTube fan, thank you for hanging out here, as I've kind of limped through the past year without having this channel's backbone that went away last October. I'm of course talking about Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole other than to say that without FFBE, and no, I did not start playing JP, I really haven't had any one game that I've been playing the most, which I think is a good lead-in to the discussion about Final Fantasy XIII. So, why is this taking so long? I just hit 25 hours of play in Final Fantasy XIII, and I've been playing it since the fall of 2024. This is taking so long, I think, for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I'll say that I committed to playing it back when I played through the Final Fantasy III Advance Remake, because I bought them at the same time. It was on sale on Steam when I bought it, and Rooks, who I knew through some FFBE Discords, was telling me to play it, and I figured, why not? I knew I would eventually need some stuff to stream once I stopped playing FFBE, and I thought that it might be fun. So we can partially blame Rooks for all my frustration with Final Fantasy XIII. If you know him, please go and give him a hard time. But I have this thing when I'm streaming or playing a playthrough of a game that I don't like to look up guides or do cheats or hacks or cheesy stuff. I like to just learn how the game works. And I don't like to do a bunch of guide or information review on camera, unless I'm specifically doing a teaching video. So I try to do that off camera when I do it, but I also don't like to do a lot of stuff off camera. I want people to see my process of me trying to learn how to play this game, and so that meant playing Final Fantasy XIII only while streaming. And that's fine for the most part, but I will say that since FFBE closed, my streaming schedule has just gotten a lot less consistent for a number of reasons. The most part of it is just me being a busy parent and having a life outside of gaming. And sometimes I go away for the weekends and I can't stream, or my kids are out late and I don't want to stream while they aren't home, or I'm responsible for them. I don't like to have to drop what I'm doing, pause the stream to step away and do something for them if they're sick or not feeling well or having trouble sleeping, or if they walk in the room. I just generally don't like to be interrupted when I'm doing something like this, and that's a me thing, not a them thing. This is totally my problem. But I've also moved in the past year, and sometimes I've just had things going on that took my attention away from gaming, or I've been too tired, especially to play a game that I don't particularly love. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Or I've been playing other games that I do love with friends. And I think in that way, committing to finishing Final Fantasy XIII, especially when I only stream for an hour and a half to 2 hours, when I stream, is its own stumbling block. I didn't want to stream something else because I said I would play through 13, and I haven't yet. I haven't finished it. That's more of a Final Fantasy XIII issue. Even though in that instance my issue is Final Fantasy XIII, because frankly I think the game is kind of boring, and we're going to talk about why I think it's boring in just a minute. But there's been a lot of streaming inconsistency in general, and I think that's the main reason that it's taken me so long. The other reason that I think it's taking me so long is just that I feel like this game takes forever to play, which I think is funny because I know there are people who have done speed runs and challenge runs, but to me, just playing through the game normally feels awful. So I can't imagine trying to do a challenge run of it. Praise to you if you like that, but not for me, dog. So before I dive too far into the things that I don't like about it, I do actually want to give some general impressions and talk a little bit about things that I do like about the game. let's start with those general impressions. The rest of the video from here on out is going to be like spoilers and discussions about the game. So if you've never played it and you think you might, you probably want to stop watching at this point. Yeah, because I do talk a little bit about it. I'm going to try and be as vague as possible for a couple of reasons. But you know, if you don't want to hear like a really harsh criticism about the game, you know, you should probably stop now. That said, that out of the way, in general, Final Fantasy 13 shares a lot in common with other Final Fantasy games while also being very different. In this game, we play as a number of characters, 6 in total, who are all named and play a role in the story of the game. So it's not like Final Fantasy 1 or the original Final Fantasy 3, where you were like blank slate characters and you could create your own names, and you know, you're just kind of like part of a narrative without it being like written about the characters. The game is set in a high technology, low magic setting. That isn't to say that magic isn't available or important. It just isn't available to the whole world, and that's an important part of the narrative. Early parts of the game, and actually to an extent the part of the game that I'm currently in, even though I'm near the game has us navigating very tiny maps with only one path in most cases, and those paths are filled with enemies and fights. And items that you can pick up. They're all visible on the screen, so if you don't want to fight an enemy, you literally just walk around it. But that would lead you to not have any encounters, and that has its own problems. It is something that I've resorted to a few times just because I get really bored with the combat. But also items that are on the ground, if they're near monsters, you can't pick them up if there are monsters nearby, so you sometimes you just have to fight. And that is ultimately good because you get items and you also get upgrades for your characters. Some degree of fighting is very necessary. In general terms, the story of Final Fantasy XIII is fairly typical of Final Fantasy games. You have an evil government controlled by evil powers and monsters, and the world or civilization is at risk of being destroyed, and we're going to do something about that. In order to prevent us from being just average Joes that save the world, which is sometimes like a typical trope for Final Fantasy games, each character is more or less chosen for our task by the otherworldly monsters and gods, and quite literally forced to do it. But by doing it, they not only get to save the world and preserve their humanity, they also get access to their magic and powers and summons and overall superhuman base characteristics. And you might be saying, Gert, you're not calling things what they are. You're right. I'm not saying things like l'Cie and Fal'Cie and Seath, because I think that all those names are stupid and confusing, and you can choose to fight me about it. I'm just going to say characters and otherworldly monsters and things like that, because I think it's unnecessarily complicated. I think the story and the narrative is very convoluted, but I'm supposed to be talking about things that I like, not things that I don't like. Visually, the game, I think, is gorgeous. I think the environments look really huge and detailed, and they're full of life and color and like action. Sound, for the most part, is pretty good. Vanille's sound effects are an exception that I'll talk about later. And I think the music is at least interesting, although sometimes it feels out of place for like the background and things. Animations as the characters fight feel appropriate and thematic to them, and they each give a character a unique style. Overall, the designs of the characters, I think, are pretty good, at least visually. Some of their backstories are a little strange, but you know, it's whatever. And I think also as we get to the end of the game, we do get a fair amount of character customization, being able to kind of make anybody into any kind of character or role you want them to be. And I think that's a cornerstone of a good Final Fantasy game. Being able to build your own like super team to overcome challenges is one of the best things about Final Fantasy, in my opinion. But I will say that that's more or less the end of what I like about Final Fantasy 13, at least so far as I've experienced it. So this next section is going to be the meat and potatoes of the video. This is going to be where I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me about the game. And that's totally fine because I'm the one playing it and I'm the one with the microphone. And like I'm Robbie Hart, you're going to listen to everything that I have to say. Gameplay in Final Fantasy games centers around combat as a general rule. There is always exploration and puzzle solving in a lot of these games, but for the most part in Final Fantasy that generally amounts to find a switch or push a button or find a key, and then you can progress, and then you can fight the boss or collect the item, and that's kind of the extent of most puzzles. In addition to the fact that those puzzles in these games are not often that complicated, you still have to fight enemies while you're walking around doing the puzzles, so like combat is kind of like central to the experience of playing a Final Fantasy game. It's why, you know, characters have abilities, and you have like weapons and equipment that give you abilities in combat and things like that. Combat in Final Fantasy 13 is, in my opinion, the worst combat experience that the entire franchise has had to offer up to this point. And I say at this point as a reference. The only games I've not played in the series are Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2. The entire gamut of Final Fantasy 13 games, 15 and 16. I have, however, played games that are like Final Fantasy X in terms of the combat, and I love that style of game. So, like, if I did play 10, I think I would probably love the combat in 10, because I've played games that are like it. But in 13, like, at least this version of 13, I know that there's a series of games that are in 13. The combat in this game is just a chore. It takes forever for the characters to do all their animations and have their gauges fill up, and you often only have minimal control over what they're doing and what happens to them. I'm gonna switch to a video right here of my very first stream of 13, where the game seriously tells you that you're controlling lightning, and Zaz is going to do what he wants. He's going to attack as he sees fit. And granted, this is before you have any abilities in magic, but that is how the entire game works. You control one character, and the other two are controlled by AI, and they're going to do what they want based on the roles that you give them and the rules of each encounter. What I mean by that is, if an enemy is immune to having their defense lowered by Deprotect, for example, then your ally won't bother casting Deprotect. It's just, they're not going to waste time trying to use an ability that's not going to work. You can learn those character weaknesses, kind of understand like what the rules are by using Libra in battle. I'll talk more about that in a second. But despite the fact to me that that's true, that they're going to do what they want. You know, maybe Deprotect is my priority. Maybe I want them to use Deprotect or De-Shell over something like Poison. I can't force my ally to cast Deprotect if they have decided that what they need to do is cast Poison 6 times until Poison sticks. You know, they decide to do that, and then like I just don't get my debuff that I need. In fact, if my ally has Slow, Poison, Imperil, Deprotect, and De-Shell, it might decide to do all of those before deciding, I'm going to try and use Deprotect. And I can't force that to happen other than choosing to be in charge of the debuffer. Like, if I make the debuffer my main character, then I can choose what abilities they use, but I can't decide that in the middle of the fight. Like, I can't decide, okay, for this fight I want to have, you know, because Vanille's not acting right, I can't make her be in charge and take control of her. I can only just change like what roles characters have by use of the paradigm system. Paradigms are basically setups of the 3 characters you control. So let's say you wanted to have somebody who like buffs your team and debuffs the enemies and have a tank. You can make a paradigm that is a Synergist, a Saboteur, and a Sentinel. In this case, because Synergist is in slot 1, I'd be controlling the Synergist, and the AI would control the Saboteur and the Sentinel. And this often gets annoying because if your AI is controlling something really important like healing or debuffing or buffing, they might do things you don't want them to do at the right time. And that just makes the fights drag out forever. Or it might just end entirely because if they decide not to heal you, which has happened to me several times. And this is all because of the game's style of combat timing, which aims to create an experience that mimics things that happen in real time. It's things happening. It seems like it's all happening simultaneously, and in fact, it needs to happen simultaneously, which is very important. But also extremely frustrating. Missing swapping to a healing role, for example, by a single second can result in the fight ending immediately, because if your allies are dead for too long and the fight just ends automatically. Or if your main character dies and reaches 0 HP at all, the fight just ends and you have to restart. So if your healer decides that they're just going to stand there, or if they get interrupted in some way, or if they decide, oh, okay, I'm going to do this instead of this, or if I switched at the wrong moment and I had to wait for their gauge to fill up before they could heal, but you can't actually see that on screen, like, they might not heal and your tank might not draw enemy fire, and the game ends because you have no control over what people are doing at any specific time. I say that the game mimics things happening in real time because while they do all happen more or less in real time, you still have to wait around for abilities to charge and people to get their turn. You can't just switch and immediately have somebody start healing. You also queue up your abilities in sequence. In my case, I can queue up 4 abilities at a time, and then they will start doing them once the gauge fills up. So you'll queue up your abilities, and then they'll be like, okay, I queued up 4 curing abilities, but because you have to choose you have to choose one target to receive all those abilities at once. I can't be like, okay, I'm gonna heal player 1 and then player 2 and then 2 heals on player 3. No, they all hit one target, all in sequence. You can't spread them out, and so like that becomes very important and very frustrating to like how you control what's happening. And basically you don't have any control over like, okay, I suddenly on the fly need to switch to healing this person because the tank didn't get attacks drawn to them, or we got hit with an AoE randomly, or something like that. You just can't control that. You also have no control over positioning. You and your allies just kind of wander around the battlefield, and it seems to make no difference where they stand. It does make a difference where enemies stand, though, because they might not get hit by your area effects if they stand really far apart. If they're all close by and you hit them with blitz from lightning, for example, they all get hit. But if they spread out, they don't. So you have to switch to single target attacks. But on the contrary, you just seem to get hit regardless. If an enemy uses an attack that hits everybody, you just get hit no matter where you're standing. But you don't have that luxury. You also can't control or manipulate it. So I can't move myself because that enemy is attacking snow. I can't move them away from snow in order to support that. I just have to wait for it to happen. They just kind of wander around. In addition to that, every fight, from garbage mobs that you just kind of like fight in the environment up to bosses, every fight seems to have a specific gimmick or pattern or prescribed trick that you're supposed to do, and you can deviate from that if you want, and the result will be that the fight's going to take 1,000 years because you didn't do what you were supposed to. Or you might just simply lose because like you can't out heal the damage, or you can't deal with something because you didn't stagger them in the right time. And or you might win, it's going to take 1,000 years to do it because you just slowly grind down their HP as opposed to you fighting the way the game wants you to. Once you know the trick for every fight, it becomes a lot easier, but it's still not up to you for the most part. Like, you could do everything right. You could set up the right paradigms, the right abilities, the right gear setup, and randomness is still going to dictate, more than anything what happens, because your allies are just kind of doing whatever. In a lot of ways, it seems like it was intended to be a step up from Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system, but it ends up being a big downgrade from it. Yes, in 12 you had to hunt down and unlock all the Gambits you wanted to create your ultimate strategy, but at least you could. You could design a strategy with like tons of different rules and basically program them to act the way you want, and it wasn't going to just randomly do a set of abilities. Instead, the combat in 13 feels like a pointless cinematic that takes too long to watch. It's simultaneously on rails and driven by random chance, with the exception that the player chooses like what roles everybody plays. There's otherwise minimal control over the outcome. And yes, like I said before, I know that you can use Libra, right? Libra can teach your allies how to attack more efficiently with elements and abilities. So like, if you say, okay, I'm going to use Libra, oh, it turns out this boss is weak to water, everybody use their water abilities. Yes, that does make you do more damage, but it also wastes time. Like, you've got to spend multiple turns using Libra to like unlock all the information about them, and you don't always have time to do that because you're getting overwhelmed by them attacking you or something else, and your allies are just doing kind of random BS. Also, you can't just Libra for free because you either have to buy abilities that buy items that do it, or use technique points, and technique points are not unlimited. But you do have to do it, otherwise your fights are going to take too long, and you're going to miss out on like upgrade points, and you're not going to know information that enemies drop because you don't know where to target what you need. And you're going to have to fight bosses eventually, so you do have to fight, but it's a waste of time. it takes forever, and getting stronger takes forever. Like, you can't just get into a fight, drop a strong ability, end the fight quickly, farm the points. Each fight takes a long time because it's intended to be fought a certain way in order to be remotely efficient. You've got to use your saboteurs and your synergist to weaken enemies and strengthen allies. Then you need to use a tank to survive. You probably need to heal at some point, but then if you swap out, their stagger meter is going to go down, so you got to use Ravagers. That way you can get to the commandos to do real damage, and all that just takes a lot of time. You can't just jump in, drop a Firaga, and end the battle. That's so different from other Final Fantasy games. Like, I'm currently playing a casual playthrough of Final Fantasy V. This is after I did my very first ever 4-job fiesta in my downtime. And it is just so easy in Final Fantasy V and other games to get stronger. You enter a fight, you use an ability, or in my case, you throw a ninja scroll, the fight ends, I get stronger, I get money, we move on. And Final Fantasy XIII is just the opposite. You have to do all this setup to get through a fight, and in the end, you don't get any money, you don't get any actual experience. All you get is these Christogen points where that you can use to like buy abilities on the Crystarium or whatever, and you get those based on how fast you do the fight. Your combats are scored based on how quickly you win, but even that's inconsistent. Sometimes you beat the target time and you get 5 stars, and other times you beat the target time and you don't get 5 stars. It's just really not clear in the game how that works, but it's so critical because otherwise you're not getting any points. And another thing is money, right? So I said you don't get money from fights, you only get money from selling items, and there are some items that are intended to be sold because they serve no other purpose, but those are limited, and that means for the most part you're very limited on money that you have for like potions and Phoenix Downs and upgrade materials. Otherwise you just seem like you're supposed to just fight to farm the materials, so you're stuck in this endless loop of boring combat to get minor upgrades that eventually theoretically add up to something big, but otherwise just take like a million years to get. And speaking of, that upgrade screen takes forever as you watch the bar slowly move from one node to another on a track as you unlock that character's abilities. And it's not a simple purchase screen where you say, okay, I've got 5,000 points, this ability costs 3,000, I spend 3,000 points like that. No, you have to watch the line, which always starts moving very slowly and then gets faster the closer it gets to it. And then you move on to the next one where it starts the slow down effect again. Then it takes so long to move from one to the next. And not to mention that each character is more or less locked into abilities that they can learn. You know, Vanille and Fang are both saboteurs innately, for example, but they learn different debuffs, and that's both good and bad. They're unique, and maybe you want both of them on your team. Having 2 debuffers, though, maybe that's a hindrance because you also need a tank at some point to keep the debuffers safe while they do their thing, but Fang is one of the tanks, so if she's not tanking, you want to have Snow, but then you've got 2 tanks, and that doesn't make sense. But Snow's other roles, at least until the end of the game, are Commando and Ravager, and maybe you don't want to have 2 Commandos and 3 Ravagers and a healer, but maybe you do got to have a healer at some point, so Vanille's got to be there, as long as she's not debuffing. But if she's not debuffing, then she's not doing the thing you need, but also she sucks at healing because she doesn't like to do it. So oh my gosh, it makes fights take longer, and then you don't get as many points, and then you have to sit there and watch the upgrade screen take longer because you don't have as many points after each fight. And now I'm ranting, right? The game just takes forever, and it's needlessly complicated. Other than combat, which is a huge part of the game for obvious reasons, and has many features that I don't enjoy, there are just environmental or design elements that I don't like. I mentioned before that combat is critical to Final Fantasy games, and that puzzles are just a part of that sometimes. In this case, the dungeons are extremely linear. I use dungeons very generously. Because they're just straight lines. Despite looking visually huge, the area that you can explore within those is usually very, very small. You cannot go into like places that they have like programmed and designed and like are visually on the screen. They're just empty space or often dead ends. There's usually only one path you can take through the game, and detours sometimes lead you to treasures, and other times there's no point for them. There's not even enemies down there, so it's like, why did somebody design this empty space? Other times you can walk just straight through a group of enemies, completely avoiding them, or avoid them by choosing one path or another. But those instances are really, really rare. More often you're just kind of taking wide paths around them to try and not fight, if you don't want to fight. The visuals, despite the fact that they're like, the zones look amazing and huge, they look like you've got so much you can do, but it's just like a narrow hallway. You can not really go everywhere. And the game often tells you where to go. There's an arrow on the minimap that tells you where your next checkpoint is. Even in big areas, you can use that to know exactly where you need to go. And it takes all sense and need of exploration out of the game. Like so we got boring combat and visuals, and like the environment's kind of boring. But then the elephant in the room is Vanille's run animation, okay? I hate Vanille's run animation, period. It needs to be destroyed with fire. In fact, I actually really dislike Vanille in general. Her voice acting's annoying, and her design is visual vomit. Her AI can't make good decisions. I've died multiple times because she just stands there doing nothing, not healing. Her animations are silly, and her run is the worst thing about her out of all that. Not a huge fan of her backstory. Her character growth is just kind of whatever. No, Vanille, no, stop running. Change the way you run. Finally, though, the cinematics and cutscenes are plentiful, but not in a good way, because we're supposed to be playing a game and not watching a movie. This game is like cutscene for 4 to 5 minutes, and then like 2 or 3 minutes of walking through a tunnel, and then more cutscene, and then 2 or 3 minutes of cutscene or walking through a tunnel, and but there's a fight. So, but the fighting's also kind of a cutscene because it's really just watching the AI play with itself. It's just. This would have been a better movie. It really would have. I mean, the story is convoluted and unnecessary and full of like naming conventions and tropes that I think they intended to be really cute and like tiebacks for like people who've played every Final Fantasy game, but it's just annoying. In a nutshell, the combat is over-designed and uninvolved, and it's basically boring, but it's required, and it's a cinematic, so you just gotta sit there and watch it. The exploration's boring and pointless, and the cutscenes make this more of a movie, so what am I going to do with all this? Because I do want to finish this game. I would like to finish this game before I go on vacation in about 2 weeks. I'd love to come back from vacation ready to stream and play something that I actually enjoy so that my streams are more fun and relevant, especially as we're getting closer to the Final Fantasy Tactics remaster that I will definitely be playing and streaming upon release. But when it comes to this game, it occurs to me that there are so many things about the game that I cannot control. One would be the cutscenes. I can just skip most of them, and I do skip most of them, like if I die and have to watch a cutscene again before a boss fight. But because this is the first playthrough of the game, I don't want to skip the story. Like the story is silly and convoluted, but I came here to see it, so like I can't just do that. The environments, I can't control the hallway nature of the game. I can decide what fights I skip to try and get through it faster, but that's often at my own expense in character development. Like I don't get stronger because I'm skipping the fights, but the fights are annoying and they take forever, so I skip them, but then I'm weaker, and there you go. So like I feel like I do need to do the fights. But because I need to do it, maybe I need to control the combat better. I think at this point it's safe to say that I've not really been putting together a really well-rounded team. Half of that is because most of the game you are forced to just use certain characters and roles that they give you along the way. So like for a while it'll be like, okay, your team is now Lightning and Saz. Okay, well we're going to switch roles and now it's going to be Hope and Vanille. Okay, we're going to switch roles and now it's going to be Snow by himself. Okay, now we're going to switch roles and it's going to be whatever, and you've got this like really complicated story where they're giving you like vignettes of like who's doing what, and that's fine. But because of that, you don't really get to pick and choose your team. But now I'm at the end, and I do get to pick and choose my team. And maybe I just didn't pick a good one. Like I've been playing with my team as Lightning, Vanille, and Snow because I figured I needed a tank, and then I needed healers and breakers, and I've got that with that combination. But maybe that's not the best way. So I did mention before that I didn't really want to look at guides while I was playing the game streaming. In this case, I have taken a little detour from that, and I did look at a guide, not because I wanted to learn how to play the game, but because I wanted to see how much time I had left. And I noticed two really big things that stood out immediately when I did that. One is that we're very close to the end of the game. I'm in Chapter 11. It goes up to Chapter 13, and there we are. So we're getting close. But also, the other thing that I saw on the particular guide that I saw is that the recommended team basically for the rest of the game is not the one that I'm using, which is fine. I make mistakes. I'm learning along the way. I didn't want to look at the guide and see why, that team was recommended, but I did take note that the suggested team by this author was Saz, Vanille, and Fang. I've been using, like I said, Lightning, Vanille, and Snow, and there are some similarities to that team, but there's also some differences. So let's talk a little bit about that. My current team is 2 damage dealers, 3 people who can build the stagger meter, one tank, 2 healers, and 1 debuffer. I can mix and match those in various combinations, but one thing that I'm missing across all of those 3 is a synergist. A synergist is somebody who uses your team or buffs to make your team stronger. So I don't have anybody doing that. Technically, at this point in the game, everybody can become anything that I want them to become just by learning abilities. But it does get very, very expensive for them to do that. So this other team that was suggested, so Saz, Vanille, and Fang, is a little bit different. They have 2 damage dealers in Saz and Fang, 3 stagger builders because everybody can be a Ravager, 2 debuffers because both Vanille and Fang can be debuffers, and they have a wider range of debuffs available to them. 1 healer only because Vanille is the only person with the medic role, 1 synergist because Saz has that, and then 1 tank because Fang is a tank. So this does cover all the roles more effectively. It gives me wider access to support for my team, even without looking at a guide and like seeing, why is this team good? We at least have all 6 of the roles covered. It seems like I can make better combinations of paradigms. But let's talk a little bit about why that might be a better combo, because I think that's relevant. So in this case, having Saz on the team means that I have access to his synergies. So he's got haste, he's got bravery, he's got faith, he's got like the various elemental abilities that like give my team elements for their attacks, which is just going to help us do more damage. And he's also got kind of unique stuff as a Ravager, and he can be a commando too. He is the only commando that can't use the launch ability, but Fang can do it, so like it's really okay. But I think he'll be good there. I think he'll be a better fit for the party than Lightning, even though Lightning was a medic. The reality was I don't really use Lightning as a medic. If I want to heal somebody or raise them from the dead, I use potions and Phoenix Downs. So that's honestly okay. So Saz can fill that role. Vanille will keep, and I'll just kind of like keep getting her abilities as I've been doing it, focusing on her medic and her saboteur. And then Fang, I definitely want to upgrade more of her saboteur abilities because she gets different stuff than Vanille. In addition to breaks, she gets things like curse and daze, and the big one is slow. So between us having haste with Saz and slow with Fang, we'll be able to be faster than the enemies, and hopefully things not get out of control so much, and then maybe Vanille's healing won't be so janky. That's kind of my plan there. So my plan is to, off camera, do some farming to try and get them up to speed, and get their weapons upgraded, and see if that makes a difference in how I'm playing the game, like to make it more efficient, and just see if it works better for me. Because honestly, at this point, the game is just so boring that even though I'm at the end of it, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I said on stream that I didn't want to play anymore because it's just like, it's not fun, but I've committed to it. So I'm going to do it off screen just so that I can, like, I don't know, watch TV while I'm doing it and see if that makes it better, and then I'll come back to streaming, streaming in videos to see if this makes a big difference. So if you're interested in seeing if, switching this team up makes a difference for me and makes it more interesting, like I said, I do want to try and beat the game before I go on vacation, and I'm going to try and do some bonus streams. I'm going to try and stream as much as I can and play the game as much as I can between now and then because I want to get this done. And there you have it. So I normally stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays over on Twitch from 9 p.m. to about 10:30 or 11 p.m. Central. If you haven't checked it out over there, I'd love to have you. If you want to see more about like when I'm streaming or when I do something, when I post videos, you can check that either on Twitch or YouTube by turning on notifications and things like that. But also, like, if you join the Discord, it tells you anytime I do something like a video or a stream. So if you're into that, we'd love to have you. Please come by. Or if you're just like a YouTube person, that's really cool. I really love that you guys are here. Make sure you're commenting and subscribing and liking to keep the videos showing up if you give a rip about the Final Fantasy 13 thing. But if nothing else, if you've come this far, you at least kind of care like what my plan is, hopefully, and want to see like if it's going to make a difference. So you want to make sure and come back to see, what comes next. Wish me luck, because I just want to get this game done, and we'll see you in the next video. But thanks for listening for this whole time. I really appreciate it.